KZN officials have confirmed that the number of people who have lost their lives in the devastating floods of the past week now stands at 306. Many others, we're told, are still missing. With cemeteries being washed up and burial space also tightening, what should be done now to accommodate what could be mass burials? Joining us to unpack this incredibly devastating story is Pepe Dass, who's the chairperson of the SA Cemeteries Association. Pepe, good morning. It's great to have you with us on the program to give us some clarity on how we will manage this part of the conversation as we come to terms with the death toll in KZN.
Good morning, Michelle. Yeah, the municipalities are, well, eThekwini municipality is actually prepared to be able to cope with burials. I think the preparation started during the pandemic, so the same sort of frame of mind that existed then to be able to cope with a large number of burials is in place now. So we are able to cope with the demand as a result of the infrastructure.
Yeah, the grim reality is that in many ways what we've been through over the past 2 years, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, as you say, has prepared us for a moment like this. How does the issue around burial space tightening, some cemeteries being washed up as a result of this flooding, how does that impact the situation?
Look, it hasn't. There definitely would be a loss of that infrastructure, and the inability to use those cemeteries at this point in time. But those are not the places that that have been prepared. So from my discussions with officials, they are in a readiness to accept burials at this point in time. But let's get back to the point of space. As the South African Cemeteries Association, we've always advocated that there's a problem with space and that one needs to look at, and we've always advocated the use of alternative, burial methods. And of course, these incidences and these tragedies that occur sort of remind us yet again that this is a challenge. But I think as far as the current situation is that we are facing, the municipality, from what I understand, is prepared to deal with the demand that would be placed on them.
I understand that there is now a call. In fact, the city is not accepting any requests for burials, at least not at the moment, until the weather clears, Pepe.
Yeah, look, I think that's just being practical. One would want to avoid, further disaster and fatality because of movement until the situation stabilizes. So it's just a practical response to a very scary situation.
How do communities deal with what residents have been describing, particularly in eThekwini? The mayor, in fact, confirming the situation there. Coffins and bones scattered across some areas in eThekwini. I know that as chairperson of the Cemeteries Association, that doesn't mean that you're involved in that particular situation. But how do you reckon communities will now come to terms with the possibility that their loved ones have, and their remains have been scattered in this way?
Look, it's very trying on those communities. Unfortunately, it's happened. And what we advocate as the association is that when you plan these cemeteries, that these cemeteries, consideration is given to geotechnical and geographical location of the cemeteries. Now, unfortunately, some of these cemeteries have been sited and developed many years ago, and unfortunately, those considerations were not taken into account. Hence, you may have cemeteries that are sited, within what would be a 100-year floodline or even a 50-year floodline, in the belief that, well, the cemetery is well sited, yet to experience a flood, maybe 10, 20, 30 years later, that then impact quite seriously on the cemetery.
Yeah.
So what we advocate is, I mean, what's happened has happened. These disasters happen and nobody has control over them. And sometimes the impact of these disasters are quite telling on communities, especially when cemeteries are destroyed like this and bonds are exposed. But I think going forward is, one needs to take the siting of these cemeteries more seriously, as they're being developed. And one also has to look at the call that we've been making as the association, that let's advocate alternatives that reduce the demand on land. Where we are forced now, because there's a shortage of land for cemetery development, based largely on the demand that the living population places for development and resident, all those other things. Let's look at alternatives. Let's look at reducing the space, and that also sort of takes away this kind of impact. Where you have these large tracts of land that and you're forced now to use land that's not necessarily suitable.
Absolutely. Lessons learned, many of them insofar as our infrastructure management is concerned, and cemeteries is also among those issues. Pepe Dass, let me thank you for your time this morning. He's the chairperson of the SA Cemeteries Organization.